going to be doing is learning how to work with A2019. We're going to be using Community Edition for this one to go through the process of downloading a spreadsheet, looping through the spreadsheet, adding items from the spreadsheet to a web form, and then submitting the web form. And the reason we're going to do that is it's going to touch on some topics that are really important when you're starting to build bots. Again, we're going to go through every single step of this, so if you're not super familiar with bot building, that's totally fine. You can hang with us. You'll be able to figure this out. We're going to go through the tenets of problem solving, as I would call them. So we have a sequence, which is the order that certain commands need to appear. Selection, which is our conditional statements. So we take a specific action if a condition is true. And then repetition. And repetition is our looping. And so we'll think about looping in programming, like doing specific actions over and over again. And so we're going to try and hit on all three of those topics with our bot build just to make sure that we can reinforce some of those concepts. No PowerPoint today. I know that's disappointing for some of you who are big PowerPoint fans. We're going to be focusing on the build and in Community Edition the whole time. So if you're not yet signed up for Community Edition, you can do that at automationanywhere.com. There's a link at the top that says product, and then from there you can go and sign up for Community Edition. Community Edition allows you to build the bots that we're going to be doing today, allows you to play around with the software, build your own bots. It's really cool that it's made available for everyone to be able to use, and so you'll be able to follow along with that. The exercise page we're going to be doing today is kind of like a simulated shopping application, right? Here we've called it Instacart with a K, but it's a sample shopping list application. We're going to go through, our bot needs to download the favorite food spreadsheet. Our bot needs to iterate through that spreadsheet, add each of those grocery items to the list here, hit add item every single time, acknowledge the terms, and then hit submit. And when we hit submit, it's going to give us some kind of feedback about like how long it took and if we got it all right and stuff like that. Okay. This URL is automationanywhere.com/automation/shopping-list.html. Someone will put that in the chat for sure too. I don't have the chat up right now, but someone else can put that in the chat, and that way you guys can all have that. So going back to Community Edition, again, you'll first want to make sure that you have your bot agent set up and connected. Here I am connected to the environment, so I'm all good there. If you haven't used Community Edition in a while, there is an update to the bot agent, so just make sure you've got that updated. All right, going back to home, I'm going to create a new bot. Let's call it AA Illustrates Instacart. We'll hit create and edit. Notice that I'm going to put this in the root of my bots folder. If you wanted to like create some new folders and have subdirectories, that's a great way to keep things organized. If you look in the bots directory of my development environment, I would be shamed for any of you to see that because I just have bots everywhere and some of them aren't even helpfully named or I don't put descriptions. So don't be a Micah. Make sure that you go through and name your bots accordingly and put helpful descriptions. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we want to make sure that we can actually have our bot navigate to this page. So I'm going to copy this URL. Again, this is going to be in the chat, so you'll be able to have that. I'm counting on someone being able to put that up there for us. The first thing we want to do is we want to look for the browser package, and we're going to click the launch website action and drag that over. Before I do that, I'm going to switch to dual mode. When I'm building like relatively straightforward bots, I'll usually just build them in the flow mode. As bots start to get really complicated, right? If I have lots of if statements and looping and like nested if statements inside of my try catch blocks, that's when it gets a little bit more difficult for me to use flow view on its own, just because like it starts to look kind of crammed and I have trouble just me mentally like seeing how things are laid out. That's probably just a Micah problem. But I'll build it in dual mode just so we can see it both ways and kind of compare and contrast there. The first thing we need to do is launch the website. I'm going to put in the URL there. Okay, automationanywhere.com, Automation Anywhere Labs, shopping-list.html. When we're thinking about a problem like this, right, to solve this, we want to break this down into steps. The first step that I think of is like making sure I have the file. And we're going to get a little more advanced there. We're going to say, download the file if I don't have it already. If I already have it, then skip and go forward, right? I'm not going to keep downloading it over and over again. So that's like a major step of this. The next major step is adding items to the list, okay? And that's going to be like looping through our spreadsheet, reading the different food items, adding them to the list, and keep hitting that add button. The third step for me is submitting the order, and that's acknowledging the terms and then hitting the submit button. So one thing that I've started to do when I'm building bots is to use the step package here. And that allows me to kind of build a shell of what I want my bot to be. So I'm going to say like download file. I'm going to add another one of those, which is going to be add items to list. And what you name these really doesn't matter. It's like for your own purposes. And then I'll hit submit order. Okay? Because the way that I think mentally is like that those are our big main goals. And every other action that we're going to be doing kind of fits inside of one of those three. And I like doing them this way because it kind of keeps me on track for what I need to build. It's also a great way to communicate your bot to other people who may be less technical, right? So if I want to explain what my bot's doing, I'm going to put this launch website in here. I'll leave it out actually. I have the ability to minimize these, right? And so I can make my bot look as simple as like, oh yeah, it's just these 3 steps. But in reality, there's a lot more going on inside of it. And so I'll admit, when I first saw steps, I thought, this is kind of lame. I don't think I'll ever use those. But I use them all the time now. And they make my bot so much cleaner and so much easier to work through. Because I know that if I'm having a problem with my bot, like in the add items to list step, I know that all the code that I have to fix should be contained within that step. And so I can minimize all this other stuff and hopefully just look at that one step. So I would strongly encourage you that if you aren't using steps right now, to at least take a look to try them out. They are super helpful when trying to, especially work with advanced bots or work with other developers and going back and like trying to think like, all right, where did I have all that logic? All right, that was a tangent. Back to our launch website. For browser, I'm going to select Google Chrome specifically. I just want to make sure that it's launching into Google Chrome. You can do this in IE. You can do this in Chrome. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to use Chrome for this one. Okay, so into my step, I'm going to open this one up. Okay, the first thing we want to start to do is let's practice just downloading this file. So I'm going to drag a download here. No, not download. Capture. So in the recorder, and again, I'm using these like, I know what most of these commands are, so I'm kind of typing a little bit to get me there. If you just want to browse, this is in the recorder package. It's the capture action. I'll drag that over here. Now, the way that this works is as we highlight any of these specific actions, it's going to show their kind of properties over here on the right, their configuration. For this one, we want to capture a specific window. So I'm going to hit refresh here. And what's going to happen is the bot agent is basically going to pull everything that's going on in my machine, every title for every window. And it's going to come back with a list of all of those windows so that I can select from that drop-down of exactly which window I want to interact with. So here I'm going to select, what was it called? Oh, you know what? It didn't show up. So one other thing, you have to make sure you have this on a separate tab for it to be recognized as its own window. So I'm going to slide that back there and hit refresh one more time. It refreshed my windows much more quickly that time. And here it is, Automation Anywhere Labs -shopping list -Google Chrome. Now, it won't really matter for our exercise here, but one thing I want to point out is the window title is what Automation Anywhere is going off of when it tries to find this specific window and then do whatever capture that we're trying to do. So one tip you can do here is you can edit the window title, and I'm going to delete that, and I'm just going to put asterisk shopping list. Again, it won't matter a ton for our lab right now, but it's a good thing to try out. So if you're doing this one with me, do the same thing. That way, in case the window title changes in the future, my bot will still be able to find it. If I'm like navigating through a multi-page application and now I'm at the enter item list, and now I'm at the submit shipping information and then checkout. those might have slightly different titles, right? They might all say like Best Buy or whatever the website is, but they might have like a different title prefix. And a good way to do that is you can put these different astrici, probably asterisk, I don't know. You can put the star, and that way you know that, even if the title changes slightly, you should be okay. I'm going to hit Capture Object. Actually, hold on. Before I do that, I want to make sure this guy is maximized. Let's switch back over here to, there we go. All right. So I'm going to hit Capture Object. Again, you just click this. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to basically highlight different objects on this page. And then I can specify like which object I want to interact with. So if you see it's drawing that little red box around the download favorite spreadsheet button, I'm going to click once it's highlighted in red there. At this point, the bot agent is going to capture what it knows about that particular object, right? So it's going to have an image of like where the object is on the page. And if I want to review that, I can click on that and I can see an image of exactly what object we were talking about there. If I scroll down here, I can see all the properties. And these are all of the object properties that Automation Anywhere knows about that particular item on the page. And so like it knows it's a link. It knows it's got an HTML tag of A. This is the DOMX path, which is like the unique path to that particular object within the page. It also has a lot of other properties that we don't really use or we're not referencing. And if you notice, they don't have checkboxes. And what that means is we're not going to use that specific content when we're searching for this object on the page. So like the fact that it's got a class of BTN success, that's like a really generic bootstrap kind of thing. And so that could be the case for all of the buttons on our page. And so that's why those wouldn't be considered here. Typically, you can just leave these as is and not modify them. But if you want to modify them, you do have that capability to like not include them or include them at your leisure. We have to specify an action here. For our action, I'm going to select left click, okay, and then I'll hit apply. Now, so far, all we have is launching the browser to go to that one web page and then to click on that link to download the file. Okay, let's save. I'm going to close this back window back here, and I'm going to run this guy real quick. I do this when I'm building bots, possibly because I'm neurotic, but possibly because this is my best way to know that what I've got so far is working. Okay. And that way, as I'm going through and building, I didn't just build like 30 steps and then find out that, oh man, like that second step totally didn't even work. And so I just wasted a ton of time. So I want to make sure that as I'm going through and building this, that my bot is working the whole time. Cool. So that part worked. Now, let me highlight one thing here. And you can probably see this. It might be a little bit tough to see. It says shopping list 1 CSV. What that means, obviously, is that I already have one of these downloaded, okay? So what we want to do is we're going to find that my downloads go directly to my downloads directory, okay? So I'm going to find the shopping list CSV. I must have an older version of it. So let's just find all of the shopping list CSVs that we have. I'm going to delete this one. There we go. I'm going to find my other one if I have an old one. There's my old one. Okay. I'm going to delete that. Check one more time, make sure that I don't have an old file there. Cool. Now, when it downloads that, I just downloaded another one, but when it downloads that, I want to show you a couple things here. One, I'm going to open this up because I want to show you what the CSV actually looks like. But two, we're going to reference it for another part of our build. So this is what that spreadsheet looks like, and it's really generic. I made this page, so if you think it's too goofy, you can blame me. This is like basically all of our favorite foods, and then all of our, let me get it back up here. There we go. All of our favorite foods, and then the family member whose favorite food it is, right? Super simple. We're going to have to loop through this so that we can read each item from this and enter it into our shopping list. Okay. Now, one other thing I want to point out here, though, is we said that we wanted to do an if statement. So what I'm going to do is we only want to download that file if it has not already been downloaded. So back into my actions pane here, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find the if statement package. And inside of that, I'm going to drag an if statement inside of my download file step. Again, just to really drill this point home, the step is really just for organizational purposes. It's not actually doing anything on execution. So it's really just for me allowing myself to kind of group things together in a logical way. For my if, I'm going to add a condition here. And my condition is going to be if file. So this one is always kind of goofy, right? A conditional statement will execute the code within it only if the condition resolves to true. So what we're really trying to say is true here is that the file does not exist. Okay? And I know that sounds kind of backwards because it's like the truth of a negative statement. But what we're trying to say is if the file that you specify, and here we're going to pick it here in a second, if that doesn't exist, then what should I do? Okay? So let's hit the browse button here. And we're going to get like a Explorer window that comes up. And we'll be able to go out and find that shopping list CSV file. And that's the reason I downloaded it again there at the last second. Because I want to make sure that I can actually select that file. So let me go to my downloads directory and grab shopping list CSV. And then it says, how long do you want to wait for that file to appear? I'll leave 0 seconds because it's either there or it's not. It's not like it's going to magically show up real quick. So I'm going to hit apply. Now, my download should only occur if the file does not exist. Okay? So I'm going to put my recorder capture step here inside of that if statement block. And that way that download click is only happening if the file does not already exist locally. Okay, so we'll test that out at the end. I'm going to minimize that download file step right now. And let's go into the add items to list. So the first thing we need to do before we can start adding items to the list is we need to open up our file. Now, this was written in a way so that anyone can do it. You don't have to have Excel. Mine opened in Excel because I happen to have Excel, but you don't have to have that. So I'm going to open up the shopping list CSV real quick. And I just want to show you kind of what it looks like again. So we have headers here, and then we have 7 people and 7 food items. So let's move this to the side real quick. Let me move this. I got too many things open here. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to drag an open CSV command into the add items to list. It's going to ask for what kind of file. Is it a file that's already on your control room, or is it a file that's out on your desktop? I'm going to say desktop file and hit browse. Again, I get that Explorer window. I'm going to choose the shopping list CSV in my downloads directory. Again, this is where it is downloading by default. So I'm just using that default path. If yours is set up to download elsewhere, that's fine. Just choose that path. Cool. So I've got my shopping list CSV here. We looked at it. We said it contains headers. This is going to be important because we're going to have to loop through this spreadsheet. And so by saying it contains headers, what I'm saying is, hey, don't consider that first row when we're doing our looping. Right? I'm going to ignore that first row because it's a header. It says family member or favorite food, so go ahead and ignore that one. It is a CSV, comma separated values, so that means comma is our delimiter. I will hit apply. All right, so that will just open the CSV, but that doesn't actually like do anything with it for us. So what we're going to need to do is add a loop action. So go down to the loop package in the actions pane. And let's drag a loop over here right after our open CSV. So for my iterator, this is what's going to control how many times my loop is going to execute. Okay, so for me, I want that to be for each row in a CSV or TXT. Now, notice here it says the session name default. That matches with the session name that was here by default. So if I had to open multiple CSVs or text files and I wanted to do multiple loops, I would control like which CSV is associated with which loop through these sessions. Okay, so if you didn't know what that was, that's what it is. It does fill in with one by default that is default, so that's helpful. So we'll just leave it as that. Now, for each row, we're going to assign to this variable. Okay, so assign current row to this variable. This needs a variable type of record, and so far we haven't created any variables for this particular lab. We really don't need that many, but one we are going to use is record. So I'm going to hit the plus sign there. The nice thing about this is I can actually create these variables on the fly. If I wanted to, I could create them over here in the variables pane on the left hand side. I'm just going to create mine on the fly right here with this X and plus sign. This variable type is a record. And think of a record as basically a single row, right? So ours is a CSV, so that first record should be dad oatmeal, right? And so that will be a single record. And so we're going to use this record so that we can pull the values out of our CSV. So I'm going to prefix this value with a lowercase r, and I'm going to say, let's say current shopping record. No. Let's do row. Current shopping row. That's fine. And we will hit create and select. Cool. So every iteration through our loop, we should be going through a new value, or I'm sorry, a new record or a new row in our CSV. Now, what do we want to do with that? Well, we want to put it into the Automation Anywhere Labs shopping list grocery item entry thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap back over to my control room here, and I broke those up to two separate tabs or two separate windows just so they can be individually recognized. I'll go back to my recorder step and hit capture. Actually, before we do that, let's just make sure this code up until now is working. So I want to show you this. Let's go to message box. And again, this is something else I do when I'm building my bots. I add message boxes all the time. Again, you want to clear them out before you put this in production. But I'll add these message boxes quite frequently because it allows me to kind of test as I'm going through, make sure I understand what's happening, understand the context. That's totally fine. Maybe I'm the only one who does that, but I would suggest you to do it too. So I'm going to put favorite food, and I'm going to put colon. So anything you put in here is going to be taken as a literal, and you can do that with literal values as well as variables. So I'm going to hit F2 here, and that's going to bring up our variable explorer. I'm going to choose the current shopping row record, and notice that it gives me an extra value here that it's asking for, and it's asking for the index or the name. So if we were to look at our, and notice that the index is 0 based, I'll point that out. If we were to look at our spreadsheet here, or our CSV, index 0 would be our first column. Index 1 would be our second column, which would be favorite food. So that would be the one we're concerned with. We can reference that value either by the index or by the name. So if I want to reference it by name, all I'd have to do is give the header value for that particular column. So I could put this, favorite food, and hit yes, insert. I will choose to close this after 5 seconds, hit apply, hit save. I'm going to close out the lab there. Let's maximize this and hit run. Now, we already have the file downloaded, so we should not see that the bot is automatically re-downloading the file, and that's another thing that we're going to be testing here. Okay, so it's already popping up with our favorite food, right? And I put the word favorite food there, otherwise it's just going to give us the food, but it says granola, it says strawberries, it says, I don't know, it's going to keep going through all the rest of the foods. Obviously you guys can read as well as I can. But we know that this is working, right? And we referenced it with that favorite food as the column. So given that we know we can get the food out, let's see if we can fill that into the actual shopping list now. So let's go back to our, again, I'm going to break this up to a separate window because we're going to use it here in a second. Let's pop back over to our build page and scroll down. So we've got the message box. We know that that works. I'm going to delete this. And what I'm going to do is we're going to do another capture step. So again, I'll scroll down to the recorder package and then capture. I will drag that over. For window, I'm going to select the window, and then I'm not going to refresh everything because my window is actually the same that I used last time. So I'm just going to select this one that says shopping list with the asterisks, and that'll work fine. I'm going to click on Capture Object. Again, if you're coming from version 11 with Capture Object, you just click it and let go. See, no hands. You don't have to like click and hold the same way that you did with version 11. So if you are using or you're familiar with version 11, you had to do like a click and hold move. All right, so we're going to highlight over this input field here. Notice it is highlighted in red. I will click into it. It's going to capture everything that it knows about that particular object. It has switched my focus back to the bot buildings page. So here, recognize that it's an input. It has a DOM-X path with an ID of my input. So that means there's an HTML ID on this object. That particular object can be uniquely referenced within the page. So I'm going to scroll down. We can ignore the rest of this. What we need to do, though, is set up our action. So for our action, I'm going to select Set Text. And notice because we're setting the text, it's going to ask for some additional properties, which is to say how do we want to fill this. So in the keystroke entry here, I'm going to press F2. And again, you could hit F2 or you can hit this Insert Value button at the far right side. I'm going to hit F2. I will select for current shopping row record. Again, last time we did it by name. This time I'll do it by index just so we can prove that both work. I'll hit Yes, Insert. So what that's going to say is for every single one of those records or those rows, whatever is in column 1, the column index 1, I should say, that text is going to be mapped into the field. Okay, I will hit Apply. Now, beyond just mapping the text into the field, we also have one other thing we have to do inside of our loop, and that's to click the Add Item button. So we need to click the Add Item button for every single item in our list so that we can add them. Otherwise, we're just going to keep writing over the same thing. So let's go back and swap that out here. I'm going to go to my recorder. I'm going to do another step of this. If you're using Chrome, you can actually use Control-C and Control-V, and that'll allow you to copy and paste. If you're not using Chrome, you can just keep dragging those over, or you can go here on the little context menu and say Copy Action, and then paste after action. All right, clicking on this one. My window title and everything like that is all good. Let's go back to Window here. I'm going to select this from the drop-down, and I'm going to hit Recapture Object. I'm going to highlight over the Add Item button. Okay, again, you might be able to see it's kind of like a faint red line around that. I'm going to click on that. It's going to capture everything it knows about that object. Again, here it knows it's a button. It has a DOM-X path, all that good stuff. For my action, I'm going to left click again and hit Apply. All right, so that should be everything for the Add Item to List step. Our last step is the Submit Order step. So I'm going to drag a capture over here. We're going to go back to Window. I'll select that from the drop-down of previously selected and hit Capture Object. You can scroll here if you need to, but I want to highlight over this Yes radio button. Okay. We don't really have the bot making a decision if it's going to accept those terms or not. So I'm just clicking it because that's what we all do, right? No one actually reads the terms. So the bot's going to click yes, just like a human would, and ignore all the terms. For the action, I will say, notice that the actions kind of change here. Because this is a radio button as the recognized type, I have the option to select or click or get status if I want to. I'm just going to hit click because that seems to work. You can hit select though. I think it's the exact same thing. So I'll leave it at click though. Hit apply. The last thing we want to do is we want to do a capture to click on the submit button. So I'm going to go here to shopping list. I'm going to click on the capture object. I will highlight over my submit order button. Okay. Again, Automation Anywhere is going to capture everything it knows about that particular object. My action is just a left click, and I'll hit apply. I'm going to minimize this. So our bot, if I were to explain this to someone, is actually pretty simple, right? It opens the website, it downloads a file, It adds all the items from the file to the list, and then it submits the order. Okay? We know it's actually a little more complex than that, and there's some more steps, but for the most part, that's what the bot does. Let's try to run this. So the fun part of building a bot live is always seeing if it's going to fail. So let's hit save and then run. It's going to work. Come on. I built it. Famous last words. Let's see if this runs. It's going to compile. It's going to be sent to our bot runner, which is our local machine. Again, it should actually ignore the download file thing because we already have the file locally. So now we can see it's starting to go through our list. It's adding all the items from our shopping list to the shopping list on this page. So it's reading from our CSV. It's going to select our yes button, and then it's going to come back with some feedback. And it's going to say, hey, you got them all right. This is what your score was. This is your accuracy. Okay. I've seen scores obviously quite a bit faster than this. Usually it's right around this range. I wouldn't freak out too much if your bot is taking 30 seconds or if it takes 15. The thing is that the bot was able to do this in an automated fashion. It did it error-free, and it was able to automatically do it, right? And so you can obviously play around with this site if you want to make it a little bit faster. Like I could have it, instead of doing object clones, I could have it maybe tab into the grocery add item list field and like type granola and then tab and hit enter and then shift tab to go back. And so you could try and do it that way with all keystrokes and see if that makes it faster. So there's different ways you could play around with this to see how you can make the bot go even faster. I will say that the timing starts when you load the page. So if you play around with it that way, you could probably get it to be like instant. But anyway, that's how the bot works. So our bot worked. Hopefully you're able to follow along with me and get that working. Hopefully it was helpful for you to see how I build bots. Like if I'm just starting straight off with something new, I like to start with that framework using steps, just kind of thinking through exactly what the bot needs to do and starting to break that up and create those different steps as kind of like my skeleton or my shell. And then I'll go back through and start to fill in those steps with actual actions afterwards. You could expand on this and start to add error handling and stuff like that. We just wanted to do a really basic bot build. Hopefully you're able to follow along with that. If you got stuck, comment in the chat. We'll have someone jump in and help you out, or I'll reply when I'm off the screen share here. But definitely, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for building a bot. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Feel free to use that page, kind of demo with it, play around with it, see if you can get your bots to work. Okay? Thanks again. This is AA Illustrates. Hope you had a good time. Go be great.